Have you noticed how fast things are breaking lately? Not just the economy or the food system, but the very idea that everything will always work out. Grocery prices are up another 16% since January. Supply chains? Still a mess. And if you think the government has a plan for what's coming next, think again. We're on our own. But here's the truth nobody tells you. Failure isn't the enemy. Being unprepared is. That quote from Thomas Edison isn't just about light bulbs. It's a survival mindset. Because right now, millions of families are waking up to find their usual routines shattered. No eggs, no oil, no warning, just empty shelves and rising prices. But that doesn't mean we've failed. It means we've found one more way that doesn't work. And if we're smart, we learn from it. We adapt. In today's video, I'm revealing 15 key lessons preppers must absorb now, and each one is backed by real-world breakdowns we're seeing in 2025. From vanishing grocery items to FEMA's quietly growing food stockpiles, we'll break down exactly what's working and what's not. And stick around because, number 4, it's something I learned the hard way, and it could change how you prep forever. I've spent the last 3 months tracking supply data, interviewing store managers, and analyzing what the government is really preparing for. This isn't fear, it's foresight. So if you want to stay a step ahead of the next shortage, subscribe to this channel right now. I post updates every week with practical advice, insider tips, and breaking news the mainstream won't touch. Grab a notepad. By the end of this list, you'll know how to avoid the 10,000 ways that don't work. And build a plan that does. Now, let's start with the first mistake that's catching even seasoned preppers off guard. Look around you. Really look. The world you knew, the one with fully stocked shelves, predictable prices, and the comfort of knowing tomorrow will be just like today, that world is slipping away. You can feel it, can't you? That gnawing. Uncertainty when you walk into a grocery store, not knowing if the basics your family needs will even be there. But here's what most people miss. This isn't a story about failure. This isn't about empty shelves or rising prices or government inaction. This is about something far more powerful, something Thomas Edison understood better than anyone. When he said, "I have not failed, I found 10,000 ways that don't work," he wasn't just talking about inventing the light bulb. He was revealing a mindset that separates survivors from victims. Think about that number for a moment. 10,000 attempts, 10,000 failures that others would have given up on. But Edison, he saw each one as a stepping stone, a lesson, a path forward. And right now, in this world of increasing chaos and uncertainty, we need that mindset more than ever. I've spent the last 3 decades studying preparedness, survival, and human resilience. I've watched systems fail, supplies vanish, and impossible scenarios become headline news. And you know what I've learned? The people who survive aren't the ones who never fail. They're the ones who learn from every single setback. Today we're going to break down the 15 most critical lessons that separate true preparedness from false security. These aren't theories. These aren't guesses. These are battle-tested insights drawn from real-world failures, including my own. Because let me tell you something. I've failed more times than I can count. I've made mistakes that could have cost me everything. But like Edison, each failure taught me something invaluable. What you're about to learn isn't just another prepper's checklist. This is a complete mindset revolution, backed by hard data and real experiences from the chaos we're seeing unfold right now in 2025. From supply chain collapses to digital infrastructure failures, from food system breakdowns to government response gaps, we're going to examine exactly what works, what doesn't, and most importantly, why. Some of what I'm about to share might shock you. Some of it might challenge everything you think you know about preparedness. But by the end of this video, you'll understand why finding 10,000 ways that don't work isn't just an interesting quote. It's the key to survival in an increasingly unstable world. So grab something to take notes with, clear your mind of what you think you know, and prepare yourself for a journey that will transform how you think about failure, preparedness, and survival itself. Because in the world we're living in now, the only real failure is being unprepared for what's coming next. Let's begin with the first and perhaps most dangerous assumption that's catching even experienced preppers off guard right now. Picture this. It's 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. You're standing in front of your local grocery store, waiting in a line that stretches around the block. The news just announced potential food shortages, and everyone had the same idea. By the time you get inside, the shelves are already stripped bare. No meat, no eggs, no rice, not even a single can of beans. This isn't some distant apocalyptic scenario. This happened just last month in cities across America. The first and most dangerous assumption that will break your preparedness plan is believing the grocery store will always be there. We've been conditioned by decades of abundance to think food just appears. But here's the brutal reality. The average grocery store only has 3 days of food on its shelves. 3 days. And that's during normal times. I remember watching in disbelief as store after store emptied during the early days of COVID. But what we're seeing now in 2025 makes those shortages look like a dress rehearsal. The supply chain isn't just stressed, it's fundamentally transforming. Major food distributors are reporting 30% fewer delivery runs. Fuel costs have forced smaller grocery chains to close. And the just-in-time inventory system that kept prices low, it's crumbling under the weight of global instability. Let me show you what failure taught me about this. 5 years ago, I relied on weekly shopping trips like everyone else. I had some extra food stored, sure, but I still counted on being able to top up whenever I needed to. Then came the ice storm of 2020. Roads closed, power out, store shelves emptied within hours. And there I was, watching my extra supplies dwindle way faster than I'd calculated. That failure became my first real lesson in true food independence. Not just storing food, but creating a system that doesn't depend on the grocery store at all. Here's what working looks like. First, you need to understand the 3 levels of food security. Level 1 is your immediate supply, what you eat this week. Level 2 is your short-term backup, what gets you through a month. But Level 3, that's where real independence lives. That's your renewable food system, your garden, your preservation skills, your local food network. The grocery store isn't just a building with food in it. It's the end point of a massively complex system that's more fragile than anyone wants to admit. Every time you walk through those automatic doors, you're betting that system will hold together. But here's what most people miss. The system doesn't have to collapse completely to fail you. It just has to hiccup at the wrong moment. Think about the foods you depend on most. Now imagine they're gone, not just for a day or a week, but for months. What's your plan? If your answer involves any version of, I'll just buy something else, you're still trapped in the grocery store mindset. Real preparedness means having at least 3 ways to meet every essential need. This isn't about hoarding. This isn't about panic buying when things get tough. This is about methodically, systematically removing your dependence on a system that's showing more cracks every day. When I see people rushing to stores at the first sign of trouble, I see Edison's $10,000. Failures playing out in real time. Each empty shelf is teaching us the same lesson. The old way doesn't work anymore. Here's your action plan. Start by documenting everything you eat for 2 weeks, every single item. Now, for each one, ask yourself, where does this really come from? How many steps between source and shelf? What are all the ways this supply could break? This isn't an exercise in fear. It's an exercise in foresight. The grocery store isn't your enemy. It's a tool, and a valuable one. But like any tool, it can fail. And when it does, the only question that matters is, did you learn from all the ways it doesn't work? Because in this new world we're living in, the difference between thriving and barely surviving often comes down to one thing: which lessons you learned before you had to. There is a moment in every major disaster that haunts me. It's not the initial chaos. It's not the panic. It's that look in people's eyes when they finally realize help isn't coming, at least not soon enough. I've seen it too many times to count. From Hurricane Katrina to the Texas grid collapse, from wildfires to floods, the government's response is always too little, too late, and never enough. Let me be clear, this isn't about politics. This isn't about pointing fingers or assigning blame. This is about understanding a fundamental truth that too many people learn the hard way. The government, despite its best intentions, cannot and will not save you in a crisis. Not because they don't want to, but because they literally cannot reach everyone who needs help in time. I learned this lesson personally during the floods of 2019. As water rose around our neighborhood, people kept saying the same thing: FEMA will come. The National Guard will help. Someone will do something. 3 days later, we were still waiting. No power, no clean water, no help. That's when I understood what the government itself has been trying to tell us all along. You need to be prepared to survive on your own for at least 72 hours. But here's what they don't tell you. 72 hours is the minimum. In many cases, you're looking at weeks, sometimes months. Just look at Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, or New Orleans after Katrina, or more recently, the supply chain breakdowns we're seeing right now in 2025. Government assistance isn't just slow, it's overwhelmed by the sheer scale of modern disasters. Think about FEMA's actual capacity. They have roughly 5,000 full-time employees to serve a nation of over 330 million people. Their emergency response teams are trained and dedicated, but they're not miracle workers. When multiple disasters hit simultaneously, which is happening more frequently now, resources get stretched thin, very thin. Here's what failure taught me about government assistance. Every time you assume they will handle it, you're making the same mistake Edison would never make. You're betting your survival on a system that has failed repeatedly, predictably, and sometimes catastrophically. But like Edison, we can learn from these failures. First, understand that government aid is designed for population-level response, not individual rescue. It's about moving large quantities of supplies to central distribution points, but getting those supplies from the distribution center to your family, that's on you. And in a serious crisis, that last mile can be the longest mile of all. Second, realize that emergency services follow triage protocols. They have to. When resources are limited, they focus on the most critical cases first. If you're not actively in danger of dying, you're not the priority. This isn't callousness, it's mathematical necessity, but knowing this changes how you prepare. Here's what working looks like. Build your preparedness plan assuming no outside help for at least 2 weeks. Yes, 2 weeks. That means water, food, medicine, power security, everything you need to sustain your household without external support. This isn't paranoia. It's pattern recognition based on documented disaster response times. Start with your critical needs, prescription medications, special dietary requirements, medical devices that need power. These are the things government aid often can't provide quickly enough in a crisis. For each critical need, develop 3 backup plans that don't rely on outside help. Remember, the government's emergency response system isn't designed to fail. It's designed to handle average emergencies, but we're not living in average times anymore. The combination of climate change, infrastructure stress, and global instability is creating cascading disasters that overwhelm traditional response capabilities. When I teach preparedness now, I use what I call the Edison Protocol. Document every way government aid has failed in past disasters. Study these failures not with fear or anger, but with Thomas Edison's methodical curiosity. Each failure is a lesson showing us one more way that doesn't work. Your action plan starts today. Take the government's own 72-hour recommendation and triple it. Build your supplies, skills, and plans around complete self-sufficiency for at least 9 days. Why 9? Because that's typically when the second wave of problems hits. after the initial crisis, but before large-scale aid arrives. The government isn't your enemy. Emergency services aren't your enemy. They're valuable resources doing critical work. But treating them as your primary survival strategy? That's one of those 10,000 ways that doesn't work. And in survival, learning that lesson too late can cost you everything. Flip a switch. The lights come on. Turn a dial. The heat flows. Plug. In your phone. It charges. We take these simple actions for granted every single day. But here's what most people don't realize. The North American power grid is running on borrowed time. It's not just aging, it's crumbling. And when it fails spectacularly. I remember standing in my kitchen during the Texas grid collapse of 2021. Outside, the temperature was dropping below zero. Inside, watching the power flicker, then die, I realized I was watching one of Edison's 10,000 failures play out in real time. But this wasn't about inventing something new. This was about the slow decay of something old. Our power grid, the largest machine ever built by humans, is showing its age. Let me share some numbers that keep utility executives up at night. The average power plant in America is over 30 years old. Nearly 70% of our transmission lines are in the last quarter of their lifespan. And the digital control systems? They're increasingly vulnerable to everything from solar flares to cyber attacks. This isn't speculation, it's engineering reality. Here's what failure has taught me about power dependency. Every system in your life that runs on electricity is a potential point of failure. Your freezer full of food, your well pump, your medical devices, your security systems. When the power goes out, the countdown begins. And in 2025, we're seeing more extended outages than ever before. Think about Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria. Over 40% of the island was still without power 3 months after the storm, or California's rolling blackouts during fire season, or the cascading grid failures we're witnessing right now across the eastern seaboard. Each one teaches us the same lesson. The grid isn't just vulnerable, it's predictably unreliable. But here's where Edison's mindset becomes crucial. Each grid failure shows us one more way that doesn't work, and more importantly, it shows us what does work. Let me share what I've learned from studying hundreds of power outages. First, understand the 3 levels of power independence. Level 1 is basic backup: batteries, generators, emergency lights. Level 2 is sustainable systems: solar, wind, proper energy storage. Level 3? That's where true resilience lives. Multiple redundant systems with no single point of failure. Most people stop at level 1. They buy a generator, store some fuel, think they're prepared. But here's what failure taught me. Any backup system that depends on a single resource, whether it's gasoline, propane, or sunshine, is just another way that doesn't work. Real power independence means layers of redundancy. Start with your critical needs. What absolutely must have power to keep running? Make a list. Now for each item, develop 3 different ways to power it. For example, a critical medical device might have main power, battery backup, solar charger, and a generator as final backup. That's not overkill. That's pattern recognition based on real-world grid failures. Here's what working looks like. A modular power system that can scale up or down based on needs. Solar panels feeding batteries. A generator for cloudy days. Manual backups for essential tools. And most importantly, the skills to maintain and repair every component. Because when the grid fails, you can't call an electrician. But there's another lesson here, one that goes beyond just storing power. It's about reducing your power dependency entirely. Every device you can replace with a non-electric alternative is one less point of failure. Manual tools, gravity-fed water systems, passive solar heating. These aren't steps backward, they're steps toward resilience. The next time you flip a switch and the lights come on, remember, you're not just using electricity. You're betting on a complex aging system that's increasingly unstable. Each outage, each blackout, each grid failure is teaching us the same thing Edison learned. Success isn't about never failing. It's about learning from every failure. Your action plan begins now. Start with an energy audit of your home. Document everything that needs power. Then, for each item, ask 3 questions. Do I really need this to run on electricity? If yes, what are 3 ways to power it without the grid? And most importantly, what's my plan for when all those ways fail? The power grid isn't your enemy. It's a magnificent but flawed system that's showing us 10,000 ways that don't work. Your job isn't to fight it or fear it, but to learn from its failures. Because in this new world of unreliable infrastructure, the difference between comfort and crisis often comes down to one thing: how many ways you've learned to keep the lights on when everything else goes dark. Walk into your kitchen right now, open your pantry, really look at what's there. Most people see full shelves and think they're prepared. But I'm going to tell you something that might shake your confidence. Nearly 80% of the food stockpiles I've evaluated would fail within the first month of a real crisis, not because there isn't enough food, but because it's the wrong food, stored the wrong way, for the wrong scenarios. I learned this lesson the hard way during an extended power outage in 2018. I had what I thought was a solid 3-month supply: canned goods, dried foods, emergency rations. But by week 3, we were facing problems I never anticipated: nutritional gaps, food fatigue, spoilage from improper storage. That's when I realized having food isn't the same as having a food system. Here's what failure taught me about food storage. Most people make the same 3 critical mistakes. First, they focus on quantity over quality. Second, they ignore nutritional balance. And third, this is the big one, they think storage is the same as preparedness. But just like Edison discovering 10,000 ways a light bulb wouldn't work, each of these mistakes teaches us something valuable. Let's break down what I call the good enough fallacy. You've got some extra canned goods, maybe some bags of rice, perhaps even some freeze-dried meals. Feels solid, right? But here's what most people miss. A true food stockpile isn't just about calories. It's about creating a sustainable, nutritionally complete system that you can actually live on for months. Think about the last time you ate only canned food for a week. Never done it? Most people haven't. But in 2025, with supply chains fracturing and food prices spiking, more families are learning the hard way that their good enough pantry isn't good enough at all. Your body needs more than just calories to function. It needs proper nutrition, variety, and foods you can actually prepare under crisis conditions. Here's what working looks like: a 5-layer food security system. Layer 1 is your everyday pantry, what you eat normally. Layer 2 is your enhanced backup, extra supplies of your regular foods. Layer 3 is your long-term storage, properly packaged staples and preserved foods. Layer 4 is your emergency rations, specialized survival food. But Layer 5, that's where real security lives, your sustainable food production and preservation skills. Most preppers stop at Layer 3 or 4. They've got the food, but they're missing the system. Here's what I mean. Can you properly preserve fresh vegetables? Do you know how to maintain a sourdough starter without commercial yeast? Can you sprout seeds for fresh greens in winter? These aren't just hobby skills. They're survival capabilities that have kept humans alive for millennia. Let me show you what failure looks like in real time. Open your pantry again. Find your oldest stored food. Check the date. Now ask yourself, do you know what environmental conditions affect its shelf life? Temperature, humidity, light exposure? Most people don't. And that ignorance costs them dearly when they need that food most. Your good enough pantry probably has another critical flaw. It's based on electricity-dependent storage, freezers full of meat, refrigerators full of perishables, electric can openers, electric stoves. Each one is a point of failure waiting to happen, and in a serious crisis, they'll all fail at once. Here's what I want you to do right now. Conduct a three-part audit of your food storage. First, categorize everything by storage method and shelf life. Second, evaluate your nutritional coverage: proteins, fats, carbohydrates, vitamins, and minerals. Third, and most importantly, assess your food independence. How much of your stockpile could you replace without the modern food system? The results might shock you. Most people discover they're missing crucial nutrients. Their storage methods are compromised. Their backup plans depend on systems that won't exist in a crisis. But here's the good news. Like Edison, each failure shows us one more way that doesn't work. And that knowledge is power. Start rebuilding your system today. Focus on shelf-stable foods that don't require refrigeration. Learn proper storage techniques for different food types. Develop preservation skills. And most importantly, start practicing with your stored foods now. Because when crisis hits, you don't rise to your expectations. You fall to your level of preparation. Your pantry isn't your enemy. Having extra food isn't wrong. But thinking it's good enough without testing, practicing, and systematically eliminating failure points, that's one of those 10,000 ways that doesn't work. And in survival, learning that lesson too late can mean the difference between thriving and just barely surviving. Close your eyes for a moment and picture this. It's a normal Tuesday morning. You're scrolling through your phone, sipping coffee, when suddenly the news breaks. Maybe it's a cyber attack on the banking system. Maybe it's an unexpected food embargo. Maybe it's a massive solar flare heading toward Earth. Whatever the trigger, you think to yourself, I'll have time to get ready. And in that moment, you've already made one of the deadliest mistakes in preparedness. I've witnessed this scene play out hundreds of times. The initial denial, the casual assumption that there will be time to react, the fatal belief that you can outrun the crowd. But here's what 20 years of studying disasters has taught me. By the time you hear the news, it's already too late. The window of opportunity closed before you even knew it existed. Let me share a personal failure that drove this lesson home. During the financial crisis of 2008, I saw the warning signs, the market indicators, the economic red flags. But I thought, I'll have time to move my assets when things get serious. You know what happened? By the time I decided to act, the banks were already limiting withdrawals. The financial instruments I planned to buy were sold out. And my carefully planned financial backup strategy? It became just one more way that doesn't work. Think about the early days of COVID-19. Remember how quickly it happened? One day people were debating whether to buy extra hand sanitizer. The next? Empty stores, panic buying, social breakdown at checkouts. And this was for paper products and cleaning supplies. Imagine if it had been food or water or medicine. The time to react isn't when everyone else is reacting. It's long before they even know they need to. Here in 2025, we're seeing this pattern accelerate. Supply chain disruptions don't announce themselves politely and wait for you to prepare. Cyber attacks don't send warning letters. Grid failures don't schedule themselves around your shopping plans. The modern world moves at the speed of information, and chaos moves even faster. Here's what failure has taught me about reaction time. In any serious crisis, there are 3 waves of realization. Wave 1 is the informed observers, the tiny minority who see it coming and act quietly. Wave 2 is the early responders, those who jump at the first official signs. But Wave 3, that's the general public. And if you're waiting until Wave 3, you're not preparing, you're panicking. Let me show you what working looks like. It's not about racing to the store when disaster strikes. It's about already having what you need, where you need it, when you need it. It's about systems, not reactions, plans, not panic. Think like Edison. He didn't wait for darkness to start inventing the light bulb. He saw the need and worked methodically to solve it before it became a crisis. Most people's emergency plans are actually panic plans. They're based on a dangerous assumption that when things go bad, you'll have time to think clearly, freedom to move freely, access to resources, transportation options, communication systems. But history shows us that in real emergencies, You usually lose at least 3 of these 5 assumptions within the first hour. Here's an exercise that will change how you think about reaction time. Write down your 5 most critical emergency actions. Now imagine you have to complete all of them in 15 minutes. No car, no phone, no internet, no warning. Impossible? That's exactly my point. Any plan that depends on perfect conditions and adequate reaction time is just another one of those 10,000 ways that doesn't work. Your real preparedness level isn't measured by what you can do with warning, it's measured by what's already in place. Think about the last major disaster in your area. How much warning did people really have? How many of them thought they'd have time to react? And how many of them ended up in lines, in traffic, in chaos? Start rebuilding your preparedness strategy today. But this time, remove reaction time from the equation entirely. Every system, every supply, every plan should be based on one core assumption. You will have 0 warning. Because in a world of instant information and instant chaos, the only reaction time you can count on is no reaction time at all. The window of opportunity isn't your enemy. Time isn't your enemy. But believing you'll have either one when you need them, that's one of those 10,000 ways that doesn't work. And in the world we're living in now, the difference between survival and crisis often comes down to one simple truth. The best time to prepare was yesterday. The second best time is now. There won't be a third best time. Walk into any prepper's storage area and you'll likely find the same scene: stacks of canned vegetables, mountains of rice, cases of freeze-dried meals. They look at these towers of food and feel secure. But I'm about to tell you something that might be hard to hear. Most of these stockpiles are fundamentally flawed, not because they lack quantity, but because they're built on dangerous assumptions about what your body actually needs to survive. Learned this lesson through brutal experience during a 3-month grid-down situation after a major hurricane. My carefully planned food storage had plenty of calories, but by week 6, we were facing problems I never expected: protein deficiency, vitamin shortages, chronic fatigue. That's when I realized I hadn't stored food. I'd stored the illusion of security. Here's what failure taught me about food selection. Most people make the same devastating mistakes. They focus on bare calories instead of nutrition. They store what they think they should eat instead of what they actually eat. And most dangerously, they ignore the psychological aspects of food entirely. But like Edison, discovering ways the light bulb wouldn't work. Each of these failures illuminates the path to success. Think about your current food storage. How much of it is simply survival calories? Rice, pasta, canned vegetables? Now ask yourself, could you actually live on that diet for 3 months? Not just survive, but maintain the energy and mental clarity you need to handle a crisis? Most people's honest answer is no. And in 2025, with extended emergencies becoming more common, that truth is costing people dearly. Let me show you what real food preparedness looks like. It's not just about calories. It's about creating a nutritionally complete system that maintains physical health, supports mental function, provides emotional comfort, requires minimal processing, remains stable in storage. Most preppers stop at the first point: calories for survival. But here's what failure has taught us. In a real crisis, you need more than just fuel. You need food that works on all 5 levels, because when everything else in life becomes unstable, food becomes more than sustenance. It becomes a cornerstone of resilience. Let's break down the most common food storage mistakes I see. First, the rice and beans fallacy. Yes, they're cheap calories. Yes, they store well. But they lack critical nutrients, require substantial water to prepare, and create meal fatigue rapidly. Second, over-reliance on canned vegetables. They're mostly water, low in calories, and heavy to transport if you need to move. Third, stockpiling freeze-dried meals without testing them. The sodium levels alone can cause health issues during extended use. Here's what working looks like: a balanced food storage system built on 7 key categories: complete proteins, both animal and plant-based, healthy fats essential for brain function and hormone production, complex carbohydrates for sustained energy, nutrient-dense superfoods to prevent deficiencies, comfort foods for psychological resilience, spices and seasonings to combat food fatigue, supplemental nutrients to fill inevitable gaps. But there's another layer most people miss: food synergy. It's not enough to have all these categories, they need to work together. Can you combine your stored foods into actual meals? Do you have the right complementary ingredients? Remember, Edison didn't just invent the light bulb, he had to create an entire electrical system to make it useful. Start rebuilding your food storage today. But this time, follow what I call the 3-week test. Before buying anything in quantity, eat it exclusively for 3 weeks. Most people discover their planned survival foods are unsustainable within days. Better to learn that now than during an actual crisis. Here's your immediate action plan. Audit your current storage using these criteria: nutritional completeness, not just calories, preparation requirements, water, fuel, equipment, storage stability, temperature, humidity, shelf life, psychological sustainability. Would you actually want to eat this? Practical usability. Can you prepare it under stress? The results might surprise you. Most people discover their storage is heavy on empty calories, but light on real nutrition. They have foods that require extensive preparation, but lack the means to prepare them. They've stored what they think they should eat, instead of what they know they will eat. Your food storage isn't your enemy. Storing extra food isn't wrong. But storing the wrong foods in the wrong ways for the wrong reasons. That's one of those 10,000 ways that doesn't work. And in survival, the difference between thriving and merely surviving often comes down to one simple truth. The best food storage isn't the one that keeps you alive. It's the one that keeps you healthy enough to handle whatever comes next. Take a moment and imagine this. You're 6 months into a crisis. The power's been spotty. The weather's been extreme. You head to your storage room confident in your supplies. But when you open that first bucket of rice, your heart sinks. Mold, insects, rancidity. In that moment, you realize a brutal truth. It doesn't matter how much food you store if you can't keep it safe until you need it. I learned this lesson in the most expensive way possible. 10 years ago, I lost nearly 80% of my food storage to environmental damage. Thousands of dollars, countless hours of preparation, gone. Not because of theft or disaster, but because I made the same mistake most preppers make. I focused on what I was storing instead of how I was storing it. Here's what failure taught me about storage conditions. Most people think storing food is about putting things in containers. But Edison didn't just invent the light bulb. He had to understand the entire ecosystem that would make it work. Food storage is exactly the same. It's not just about the food. It's about creating and maintaining an environment where that food can survive. Let me show you what I mean. Right now in 2025, we're seeing an unprecedented wave of storage failures. Climate instability means temperature swings that would have been rare are now common. Power fluctuations expose temperature-sensitive supplies to damaging conditions. And the quality of many storage containers has declined as manufacturing standards slip. Each failure is teaching us the same lesson. The old ways of storage don't work anymore. Think about where you're storing your supplies right now. Do you know the actual temperature in that space? The humidity levels? The light exposure? Most people don't. They choose storage locations based on convenience rather than conditions. But here's the reality. Every food has environmental requirements that must be met, or it will fail. And in storage, failure isn't just inconvenient, it's catastrophic. Here's what proper storage looks like. It's a system built on 5 critical pillars: temperature control, the enemy of shelf life; moisture management, the catalyst of decay; light protection, the destroyer of nutrients; pest prevention, the silent invader; air quality, the overlooked killer; Most preppers focus on just one or two of these. They might use good containers or control temperature. But, like Edison's early cray experiments, partial solutions lead to complete failures. You need all 5 pillars working together to create a truly stable storage environment. Let me share the most common storage mistakes I see. First, the basement fallacy. Yes, it's cool down there, but without proper moisture control, it's a death. Zone for food storage. Second, the garage gamble. Convenient? Sure, but temperature swings will cut your food's shelf life in half, or worse. Third, the container trap. Even the best bucket means nothing if what's inside isn't properly packaged first. Here's what working looks like. A layered defense system for your supplies. Start with proper primary packaging, Mylar bags with oxygen, absorbers for dry goods, proper canning for wet goods. Add appropriate containers, food-grade buckets, glass jars, metal containers. Then create a controlled environment, temperature monitoring, humidity control, proper ventilation. But there's another layer most people miss, environmental monitoring. You need to know what's happening in your storage area at all times. Temperature sensors, humidity gauges, regular inspections. Because, like Edison testing thousands of filaments, you need to know not just what works, but why it works. And more importantly, why it fails. Start rebuilding your storage system today. But this time, follow what I call the 4 corners protocol. Map your storage area's environmental conditions, temperature, humidity, light, for all 4 corners at all 4 times. Morning, noon, evening, night. Document the worst conditions. You plan your storage based on your worst conditions. Not your best. Create systems to improve those conditions where needed. Here's your immediate action plan. Get a temperature and humidity monitor for every storage area. Check all current containers for signs of failure. Implement proper rotation. Systems create an inspection schedule and stick to it. Document everything. Because what you don't measure, you can't improve. The conditions of your storage aren't your enemy. Environmental challenges aren't your enemy. But ignoring them, hoping they won't matter, treating storage like a store-it-and-forget-it system, that's one of those 10,000 ways that doesn't work. And in survival, the difference between success and failure often comes down to one simple truth. It's not just what you store. It's how you protect it that matters. Your storage conditions are telling you a story. Are you listening? Because every time food spoils, every time supplies degrade, every time storage fails, it's teaching us the same lesson Edison learned. Success isn't about never failing. It's about learning from every failure until you find what works. And in food storage, what works is systematic, monitored, and maintained with religious dedication. Turn on your tap right now. Watch that clean, safe water flow effortlessly. Now imagine it stops. Not for hours, not for days, but for weeks. No warning, no timeline for restoration. Just silence when you turn that handle. This isn't some distant, apocalyptic scenario. It's happening right now in cities across America. And it's teaching us the same lesson over and over. When it comes to water, there is no such thing as too prepared. I learned this truth during a month-long water crisis in 2017. The municipal system failed after a chemical spill. Everyone thought they were ready. Everyone had some water stored. But here's what failure taught me. Most people's water preparation is based on dangerously optimistic assumptions. They plan for interruptions, not failures. They plan for inconvenience, not survival. Here's what I discovered. The average person stores less than 20% of the water they actually need. Not because they don't understand water is important, but because they fundamentally misunderstand how much water life requires. Like Edison testing inadequate filaments, each insufficient water plan illuminates one more way that doesn't work. Think about your water usage for just one day. Not just drinking, everything. Cooking, cleaning, hygiene, medical needs, food, preparation. Now multiply that by every person in your household. Most people need between 3 to 5 gallons per person per day for basic functions. But in 2025, with infrastructure failures becoming more common, most people's water storage wouldn't last a week. Let me share the 3 most dangerous water preparation myths I see. First, the "I'll just fill my bathtub" fallacy. Without proper preparation and sealed containers, that water becomes contaminated within days. Second, the "I have a water filter" assumption. Most filters can't handle chemical contamination, and few people store enough replacement cartridges. Third, the "there's a creek nearby" gamble. Natural water sources can become inaccessible, contaminated, or overwhelmed by others with the same plan. Here's what actual water preparedness looks like. It's built on 4 pillars: primary storage, immediate access, sealed containers; secondary sources, wells, rain collection, natural sources; treatment systems, multiple methods for different contaminants; conservation plans, reducing usage without compromising health. Most people stop at the first pillar, if they even get that far. But like Edison's work on the electrical system, every part must function together. Storage without treatment fails. Treatment without storage fails. Sources without access fail. Each component is essential. Let me show you what working looks like. Start with storage, 1 gallon per person per day for drinking and basic food preparation. Double that for hygiene and cleaning. Now triple your total for safety margin. Yes, it seems excessive until you need it. Next, treatment redundancy. You need at least 3 ways to make water safe. Primary filter system with stored replacement. Parts: chemical treatment, stored properly for maximum shelf life. Boiling capability with fuel reserves. Secondary filter. Backup, but here's what most people miss. Water systems need maintenance. Stored water needs rotation. Filters need testing. Equipment needs inspection. Like Edison's methodical testing, each step must be verified, documented, and maintained. Start rebuilding your water preparedness today. Use what I call the 3 circles approach. Inner circle, immediate storage, 2 weeks minimum. Middle circle, local sources, identified, tested, and equipped. Outer circle, regional resources, mapped and accessible. Your action plan starts now. Audit your current water storage. Actual gallons, not estimates. Test all your treatment methods. Don't assume they work. Create a water usage map. Track every drop for 1 week. Develop and practice conservation protocols. Establish collection and storage rotation schedules. Water isn't your enemy. Infrastructure failures aren't your enemy. But assuming you'll have time to prepare, believing you can survive on less than you need, thinking that water preparedness is simple, those are just more of those 10,000 ways that don't work. Remember, when Edison was developing the light bulb, he wasn't just trying to create light, he was trying to create reliable, sustainable light. Your water preparedness needs the same approach. It's not just about having water, it's about having reliable, sustainable access to safe water no matter what happens. Because in this new world of uncertainty, the difference between survival and crisis often comes down to one simple truth. Water preparation isn't about how much you store, it's about how completely you've eliminated every possible point of failure. Start testing your system now while your tap still flows. Tomorrow might be too late. Picture this moment. You're deep into an emergency, reaching for those supplies you carefully stored years ago. But as you open containers and check dates, your confidence turns to dread. Expired medications, rancid fats, stale grains. This isn't just about losing supplies, it's about discovering failure at exactly the wrong moment. And in 2025, with supply chains fractured and replacements harder to find, this kind of failure can be catastrophic. I lived this nightmare during a regional crisis in 2019. Half my medical supplies had expired. A third of my food storage had degraded. Not because I didn't care, but because I made the same mistake most preppers make. I treated inventory management as an afterthought instead of a core survival skill. Like Edison discovering that a filament alone wasn't enough, I learned that storage without systematic rotation is just another way that doesn't work. Here's what failure taught me about inventory management. Most people approach it backward. They focus on acquisition instead of maintenance. They trust their memory instead of their systems. They react to problems instead of preventing them. But in real emergencies, this approach fails every single time. Think about your own supplies right now. Do you know exactly what you have? Not just categories, specific items, quantities, locations, expiration dates. Most people don't. They have what I call confidence by volume. Lots of supplies, but little actual knowledge. And in 2025, with resources becoming more precious and replacements more uncertain, that approach is more dangerous than ever. Let me share the 3 deadliest inventory mistakes I see. First, the "I'll remember" fallacy. Human memory fails, especially under stress. Without a system, you're guaranteeing failure. Second, the "check it later" trap. Later never comes, or it comes too late. Third, the just-in-case stockpile. Buying without planning leads to waste, gaps, and dangerous assumptions. Here's what working looks like. It's built on what I call the 5 pillars of inventory control. Documentation, every item, every location, every date. Rotation, systematic movement of supplies, based on expiration. Inspection, regular checks for quality and condition. Consumption tracking, real usage patterns, not guesses. Replacement planning, proactive, not reactive. Most people manage maybe 1 or 2 of these pillars. But like Edison's electrical system, each component is essential. Documentation without rotation fails. Rotation without inspection fails. Inspection without tracking fails. They all work together, or they don't work at all. Let me show you what systematic inventory management looks like. Start with a complete inventory system. Every item gets unique location code, purchase date, expiration date, rotation schedule, inspection requirements, replacement triggers. But here's what most people miss. Inventory management isn't just about knowing what you have. It's about understanding what you use. You need 3 critical tracking elements: usage rates, how fast you actually consume items; seasonal patterns, when usage increases or decreases; stress consumption, how emergencies change your needs. Start rebuilding your inventory system today. Use what I call the 4R method. Record, document everything you have. Rate, assign priority and rotation schedules. Rotate, move supplies based on dates. Replace, maintain minimum quantities. Your immediate action plan, create a digital inventory. Backup on paper. Establish weekly inspection routines. Set up rotation triggers. Track actual usage for 1 month. Build replacement schedules based on real data, but there's another layer most people miss: the psychological element. Good inventory management requires discipline, regular habits, consistent attention. Like Edison's thousands of experiments, it's not about brilliant insights. It's about methodical, systematic work. Your supplies aren't your enemy. Expiration dates aren't your enemy. But treating inventory management as optional, thinking you can track everything in your head, believing that stored supplies will take care of themselves, those are just more of those 10,000 ways that don't work. Remember, when Edison finally succeeded with the light bulb, it wasn't just because he found the right filament. It was because he developed systems to make that filament reliably, consistently, every single time. Your preparedness needs the same approach. It's not just about having supplies, it's about having systems that ensure those supplies are ready when you need them. Because in this world of increasing uncertainty, the difference between security and disaster often comes down to one simple truth. It's not what you have that matters, it's what you can find, use, and replace when it matters most. Start building your system now, while you have the luxury of time to get it right. Imagine this scenario. The power's been out for a week. Your generator just failed. You've got the repair manual, you've got the tools, you've got the parts. But as you stare at the engine, you realize a brutal truth. You've never actually done this before. All your preparation, all your supplies, all your planning, paralyzed by a simple lack of skill. And in that moment, you understand what Edison meant about finding ways that don't work. I learned this lesson during a winter storm in 2020. My backup systems were in place. My supplies were solid. But when multiple systems failed at once, I discovered the hard way that gear without skill is just dead weight. You can own every tool in the world, but if you don't know how to use them under pressure, you're just collecting expensive paperweights. Here's what failure taught me about skill building. Most people approach it backward. They stockpile equipment first and figure they'll learn to use it later. They collect knowledge, but never convert it to capability. They mistake watching videos for actual experience. But like Edison's thousands of experiments, real skill only comes through hands-on failure and adaptation. Think about your current preparation level. How many of your survival plans depend on skills you've never actually used? In 2025, with AI making information more accessible than ever, there's a dangerous tendency to think that having information equals having ability. But when systems fail, when the power's out, when you can't just Google a solution, that's when the difference between knowledge and skill becomes life-changing. Let me share the 3 most dangerous skill-building myths I see. First, the L. Learn when I need to fallacy. Skills under pressure are impossible without foundation. Second, the I watched a video trap. Passive learning never replaces active doing. Third, the it's just like assumption. Similar experience isn't the same as specific capability. Here's what real skill building looks like. It's built on what I call the 5 levels of competence. Knowledge, understanding the theory. Observation, watching skilled execution. Practice, controlled environment training. Stress testing, performance under pressure. Teaching, mastery through. Transmission, most people stop at level 1 or 2. But like Edison's work on the electrical system, each level builds on the others. Knowledge without practice fails. Practice without stress testing fails. Individual skills without integration fails. The system only works when all parts work together. Let me show you what systematic skill building looks like. Start with critical capabilities, emergency repair, and maintenance, food preservation and preparation, medical response and care security, and awareness, communication, and coordination. But here's what most people miss. Skills aren't static. They're perishable. They need regular practice, constant refinement, and systematic testing. Like Edison's laboratory work, each practice session is an experiment in finding what works and what doesn't. Start your skill-building program today. Use what I call the 3T method: theory, learn the principles; training, regular scheduled practice; testing, realistic scenario challenges; your immediate action plan. List every skill your survival plans depend on. Rate your current capability. Honestly, 0-5 scale. Identify your critical skill gaps. Create a weekly practice schedule. Find mentors for your weak areas. But there's another layer most people miss: the integration of skills. Individual capabilities are important, but real resilience comes from knowing how different skills work together. Can you repair equipment while maintaining security? Can you prepare food while managing medical issues? Can you communicate effectively while handling multiple problems? Your gear isn't your enemy. Information isn't your enemy. But thinking you can develop skills without dedicated practice, believing you can learn complex capabilities quickly in an emergency, assuming that having tools equals having ability, those are just more of those 10,000 ways that don't work. Remember, when Edison was developing the light bulb, he didn't just read about electricity, he worked with it every day. He didn't just theorize about filaments, he tested them relentlessly. Your preparedness needs the same approach. It's not just about knowing what to do, it's about being able to do it when everything is going wrong, because in this world, of increasing complexity and uncertainty. The difference between survival and failure often comes down to one simple truth. It's not what you have or what you know that matters, it's what you can actually do when it matters most. Start building your capabilities now while you have the luxury of learning from non-fatal failures. Because when real crisis hits, the only skills you can count on are the ones you've already mastered. Stop for a moment and look at your preparedness to-do list. The food storage you need to expand, the skills you need to learn, the equipment you need to maintain, the plans you need to update. Feeling that familiar wave of overwhelm? That creeping urge to just give up? You're not alone. And like Edison facing thousands of failed experiments, you're actually standing at the doorway to real progress, if you know how to walk through it. I hit this wall hard in 2018. My preparedness plans had grown into an unmanageable monster. Lists upon lists, projects upon projects, every news headline adding more urgent tasks. I was drowning in good intentions and incomplete actions. That's when failure taught me something crucial. Overwhelm isn't a sign of inadequacy. It's a sign that you're using the wrong system. Here's what I discovered about preparedness burnout. Most people approach it like a sprint when it's really an ultramarathon. They try to do everything at once, burn out quickly, and then give up entirely. But like Edison's methodical approach to invention, real progress comes from systematic, sustainable effort, not frantic bursts of activity. Think about your current approach to preparedness. How many half-finished projects do you have? How many "I'll get to it later" items? In 2025, with threats multiplying and complexity increasing, it's easy to fall into the trap of panic-driven preparation. But here's the truth. Scattered effort is just another way that doesn't work. Let me share the 3 most dangerous overwhelm triggers I see. First, the all-or-nothing fallacy, thinking you need complete systems immediately. Second, the perfect plan paralysis, waiting for ideal conditions that never come. Third, the crisis sprint burnout, exhausting yourself with unsustainable effort. Here's what sustainable preparedness looks like. It's built on what I call the 4 foundations of progress. Systematic prioritization, what truly matters most. Manageable chunks, what you can actually accomplish. Regular rhythms, what you can sustain long-term. Visible progress, what keeps you motivated. Most people jump straight to action without these foundations. But like Edison's research lab, you need a system that can sustain thousands of attempts without burning out. Each foundation supports the others, creating a framework for consistent progress. Let me show you what working looks like. Start with what I call progress mapping. List everything you want to accomplish. Break each goal into monthly objectives. Break those into weekly tasks. Break those into daily actions. Celebrate every small win, but here's what most people miss. Progress isn't linear. You'll have setbacks, you'll have failures, you'll have days when nothing seems to work. Like Edison's thousands of attempts, each failure is actually moving you forward, if you learn from it instead of being defeated by it. Start rebuilding your approach today. Use what I call the 3P method. Prioritize what must happen. First, partition, break it into digestible pieces. Progress, move forward consistently. Your immediate action plan. Audit your current projects and goals. Identify your top 3 priorities. Create weekly action plans. Set up daily progress checks. Build in regular rest and recovery, but there's another layer most people miss, the psychology of sustainable progress. It's not just about what you do, it's about how you think about what you do. Every small step forward is a victory. Every lesson learned is progress. Every failure that teaches you something new is actually a success. Your ambitions aren't your enemy. Your goals aren't your enemy. But trying to do everything at once, letting perfect become the enemy of good, burning yourself out with unsustainable effort, those are just more of those 10,000 ways that don't work. Remember, when Edison was working toward the light bulb, he didn't see his thousands of attempts as failures, He saw them as successful discoveries of what didn't work. Your preparedness journey needs the same perspective. It's not about reaching perfection. It's about making consistent, sustainable progress. Because in this world of endless challenges and escalating threats, the difference between success and failure often comes down to one simple truth. It's not how much you can do in a day that matters. It's how consistently you can move forward over months and years. Start building your sustainable system now while you have the luxury of time to experiment. Like Edison, you'll find that every failure brings you one step closer to what actually works. Open any prepper forum, survival blog, or preparedness video comment section. You'll see the same pattern over and over. People desperately searching for the perfect plan to copy. The ultimate bug-out bag list, the complete food storage blueprint, the foolproof survival strategy. But here's what 2 decades of emergency response has taught me. There is no universal solution, and blindly copying someone else's plan is just another way that doesn't work. I learned this lesson through a series of painful failures in my early prepping days. I followed expert advice perfectly, bought exactly what they recommended, copied their plans down to the letter. But when crisis hit, I discovered that their solutions didn't fit my reality. Their urban bug-out plan was useless for my rural location. Their food storage didn't account for my family's dietary needs. Their security setup assumed resources I didn't have. Here's what failure taught me about preparedness planning. Most people mistake inspiration for instruction. They see someone else's success and try to duplicate it exactly without understanding the context that made it work. But like Edison testing thousands of materials for his light bulb, what works in one situation often fails completely in another. Think about your current preparedness plans. How many of them did you actually design for your specific situation? How many are just copies of what worked for someone else? In 2025, with social media influencers selling one-size-fits-all solutions, this problem is more dangerous than ever. Because when crisis hits, the only plan that matters is the one that works for your unique circumstances. Let me share the 3 most dangerous copying mistakes I see. First, the expert assumption fallacy. Thinking what works for a trained professional will work for you. Second, the perfect setup trap. Copying plans that require resources you don't have. Third, the universal solution myth. Believing that one approach can work for every situation. Here's what real preparedness planning looks like. It's built on what I call the 5 pillars of personal planning: situation analysis, your specific context; resource assessment, be what you actually have; capability matching, what you can actually do; environmental adaptation, your local conditions; personal optimization, your unique needs. Most people jump straight to copying solutions without these foundations. But like Edison's systematic experimentation, you need to understand what makes something work before you can adapt it successfully. Each pillar helps you translate others' experiences into your reality. Let me show you what working looks like. Start with a personal preparedness audit, your location's specific challenges, your family's unique needs, your actual resources and skills, your community's characteristics, your realistic constraints. But here's what most people miss. Good ideas aren't the same as good solutions. You need what I call context translation, the ability to extract principles from others' experiences and adapt them to your situation. Like Edison learning from each failed experiment, you need to understand why something works, not just how. Start rebuilding your plans today. Use what I call the 3A method. Analyze what makes something work. Adapt how it fits your situation. Authenticate, test it in your context. Your immediate action plan. Review all your current preparedness plans. Identify copied elements that don't fit. List your specific needs and constraints. Create custom solutions for your context. Test everything in your environment, but there's another layer most people miss: the difference between principles and practices. Principles are universal, like the need for water, food, and security. Practices are personal, the specific ways you meet those needs. Understanding this difference is crucial for successful adaptation. Other preppers aren't your enemy. Expert. Advice isn't your enemy, but copying plans without adaptation, following advice without understanding, implementing solutions without testing, those are just more of those 10,000 ways that don't work. Remember, when Edison finally succeeded, it wasn't because he copied someone else's design. It was because he understood the principles of electricity and adapted them to create something new. Your preparedness needs the same approach. It's not about finding the perfect plan to copy. It's about understanding principles deeply enough to create solutions that work for you. Because in this world of increasing uncertainty, the difference between survival and failure often comes down to one simple truth. The best plan isn't the one that worked for someone else. It's the one that works for you, your family, your resources, and your reality. Start building your custom solutions now, while you have the luxury of trial and error. Because when crisis hits, the only plan that matters is the one that actually works in your world. Listen carefully to conversations about disasters and emergencies. You'll hear the same dangerous phrase repeated over and over. That can't happen here. Sometimes it's said with confidence, sometimes with dismissal, but always with the same underlying assumption that somehow your location is magically immune to crisis. In 2025, with cascading failures becoming the norm, this might be the most expensive assumption you can make. I learned this lesson in the most humbling way possible. For years, I lived in what I thought was a safe area, good infrastructure, stable community, no major natural disasters. Then came the perfect storm. A cyber attack on the power grid followed by a supply chain collapse, followed by social unrest. In 72 hours, our immune community discovered what Edison learned thousands of times. There are countless ways for systems to fail. Here's what failure taught me about location-based complacency. Most people confuse unfamiliarity with impossibility. They assume that because something hasn't happened here, it can't happen here. But like Edison testing materials that everyone else ignored, we need to understand that unprecedented doesn't mean impossible. It just means it hasn't happened yet. Think about your community right now. What disasters have you mentally ruled out? What threats have you dismissed? In the interconnected world of 2025, we're learning a brutal lesson. There are no isolated systems anymore. A failure in one place cascades into failures everywhere. The only question is whether you're prepared for the ripples when they reach you. Let me share the 3 most dangerous locality assumptions I see. First, the natural shield fallacy, believing geography protects you from all threats. Second, the it never has trap, using past experience as a guarantee of future safety. Third, the we're different myth, thinking your community is somehow unique in its immunity. Here's what real threat assessment looks like. It's built on what I call the 5 circles of vulnerability. Direct threats, what can happen here. Indirect impacts, how problems elsewhere affect you. Cascade effects, how failures chain together. Resource dependencies, what you rely on from outside. Social dynamics, how your community responds to stress. Most people only consider the first circle, but like Edison's work on the electrical system, every component is connected. A failure in one area inevitably affects others. Understanding these connections is the key to real preparedness. Let me show you what working looks like. Start with a comprehensive threat analysis. Historical events in your region, infrastructure dependencies, supply chain, vulnerabilities, community. Response patterns. Hidden system connections, but here's what most people miss. Threats don't need direct access to affect you. A disaster hundreds of miles away can disrupt your food supply. A crisis in another country can cut off critical medications. A failure in one system can trigger failures in seemingly unrelated systems. Start rebuilding your threat assessment today. Use what I call the 3D method. Direct, what can physically happen here. Dependent, what you rely on from elsewhere. Derivative, what can cascade into your area. Your immediate action plan. Map your community's resource flows. Identify critical dependencies. List potential cascade failures. Analyze social stress points. Build response plans for each layer. But there's another layer most people miss, the psychology of normalcy bias. We're hardwired to believe that tomorrow will be like today. That's why it's crucial to deliberately challenge your assumptions about what's possible. Like Edison methodically testing materials others dismissed, we need to systematically examine our blind spots. Your location isn't your enemy. Your community isn't your enemy, but believing you're somehow immune to crisis? Assuming that it can't happen here? Dismissing threats because they're unprecedented? Those are just more of those 10,000 ways that doesn't work. Remember, when Edison was inventing the light bulb, he had to consider possibilities that others thought impossible. Your preparedness needs the same approach. It's not about what has happened. It's about what could happen and how ready you are when it does. Because in this interconnected world of cascading failures, the difference between resilience and vulnerability often comes down to one simple truth. It's not whether something can happen here. It's how prepared you are when it does. Start expanding your threat assessment now while you have the luxury of methodical analysis. Because when crisis hits, the only plans that matter are the ones that anticipated the impossible. Take out your wallet, look at your bank statements, review your investments. Now ask yourself, in a serious crisis, how many of these financial tools would actually work? Because here's what 20 years of studying economic disruptions has taught me. Most preppers have bins full of supplies, but are completely unprepared for financial emergencies. And in 2025, with digital systems more vulnerable than ever, that's a disaster waiting to happen. I learned this lesson during the banking crisis of 2008. I had food stored, I had supplies ready, I had plans in place. But when the financial system started shaking, I discovered that all my physical preparation meant nothing without financial resilience. Like Edison learning that a light bulb needs more than just a filament, I realized that preparedness requires a complete financial system. Here's what failure taught me about financial preparation. Most people focus on physical assets while ignoring financial vulnerabilities. They store food, but not value. They stockpile supplies, but not stability. But like Edison's systematic approach to invention, real preparedness requires understanding every component of survival, including the financial ones. Think about your current financial position. How much of your wealth exists only as digital numbers? How many of your survival plans depend on functioning financial systems? In 2025, with cyber threats growing and financial systems increasingly fragile, the gap between physical and financial preparation has become a critical vulnerability. Let me share the 3 most dangerous financial preparation mistakes I see. First, the cash-only fallacy, having only one form of financial backup. Second, the it's-all digital trap, keeping wealth solely in electronic form. Third, the survival-rich, cash-poor syndrome, having supplies but no liquidity. Here's what real financial preparedness looks like. It's built on what I call the 5 pillars of financial resilience: liquid assets, immediately accessible funds, physical wealth, tangible value storage, practical skills, marketable abilities, resource networks, trade relationships, system, redundancy, multiple financial options. Most people focus on just 1 or 2 pillars, but like Edison's work on the electrical grid, every component must function together. Cash without skills fails. Skills without networks fail. Networks without resources fail. The system only works when all parts are prepared. Let me show you what working looks like. Start with a financial resilience audit. Emergency cash reserves, portable value storage skills, inventory, community connections, alternative exchange systems. But here's what most people miss. Financial preparedness isn't just about having money, it's about having options. In every major crisis, the survivors aren't just the ones with resources. They're the ones who can access and use those resources. Flexibly start rebuilding your financial preparedness today. Use what I call the 3L method. Liquidity, what you can access immediately. Longevity, what preserves value over time. Leverage, what gives you options and influence. Your immediate action plan, create a financial vulnerability map, establish multiple cash reserves, develop valuable trade skills, build local exchange networks, set up system redundancies, but there is another layer most people miss, the psychology of financial crisis. When systems start failing, people don't behave rationally. Understanding this is crucial for financial preparation. Like Edison testing materials under extreme conditions, you need to know how your financial plans perform under stress. Your money isn't your enemy. The financial system isn't your enemy, but keeping all your wealth in one form, depending entirely on digital systems, ignoring the financial aspects of preparedness, those are just more of those 10,000 ways that don't work. Remember, when Edison was developing the electrical system, he had to consider not just technical function, but economic viability. Your preparedness needs the same approach. It's not just about having resources, it's about being able to access and use them when conventional systems fail. Because in this world of increasing financial instability, the difference between security and vulnerability often comes down to one simple truth. It's not how much you have that matters, it's how flexibly you can access and use what you have when traditional systems fail. Start building your financial resilience now, while you have the luxury of options. Because when crisis hits, the only wealth that matters is the wealth you can actually use. Look around your home right now at your stored supplies, your emergency plans, your carefully prepared systems. Now ask yourself, does everyone in your household know how to use them? Because here's what decades of disaster response has taught me. The most sophisticated preparedness system in the world fails instantly if your family doesn't understand it, support it, or know how to use it. I learned this lesson during a regional blackout in 2017. I had every system in place. Backup power, stored food, water filtration, everything. But when crisis hit and I wasn't home, my family struggled to implement the plans I'd created. Not because they weren't capable, but because I'd made the deadly mistake of preparing around them instead of with them. Like Edison learning that innovation requires a team, I discovered that preparedness is inherently collaborative. Here's what failure taught me about family preparation. Most people approach it as a solo mission. They plan alone, prepare alone, and expect their family to somehow fall in line when needed. But like Edison's systematic approach to invention, real preparedness requires every component, including every family member, to work together seamlessly. Think about your current preparedness strategy. How much of it depends on you being present? How much of it have you actually practiced with your family? In 2025, with threats becoming more complex and response times more critical, the gap between individual preparation and family capability has become a critical vulnerability. Let me share the 3 most dangerous family preparation mistakes I see. First, the "I'll handle it" fallacy, assuming you'll always be there to implement plans. Second, the "they'll learn later" trap, postponing family training until crisis hits. Third, the "just trust me" syndrome, expecting blind compliance. Without understanding, here's what real family preparedness looks like. It's built on what I call the 5 pillars of family integration. Shared understanding, everyone knows why. Personal investment, everyone contributes. Age-appropriate training, everyone participates. Regular practice, everyone develops competence. Continuous improvement, everyone evolves. Most families implement 1 or 2 pillars at best. But like Edison's electrical system, every component must function together. Understanding without practice fails. Practice without investment fails. Investment without improvement fails. The system only works when everyone works together. Let me show you what working looks like. Start with family engagement, regular family meetings, collaborative planning sessions, skills assessment for each member, role assignment based on abilities, progressive training programs. But here's what most people miss. Family preparedness isn't just about teaching skills, it's about building a resilient family culture. Each member needs to understand not just what to do, but why it matters. Like Edison's team of innovators, everyone needs to see their role in the bigger picture. Start rebuilding your family preparedness today. Use what I call the 3E method. Engage, get everyone involved in planning. Educate, build skills progressively. Empower, give real responsibility. Your immediate action plan. Conduct a family skills inventory. Create individual development. Plan, schedule regular practice sessions. Assign emergency roles and backups. Develop communication protocols. But there's another layer most people miss, the psychological aspect of family preparedness. Fear and uncertainty can paralyze family members if they don't understand the why behind the what. Like Edison testing ideas with his team, you need to make preparedness a collaborative journey of discovery, not a set of imposed rules. Children aren't your enemy. Skeptical spouses aren't your enemy. Family resistance isn't your enemy, but preparing in isolation, keeping plans to yourself, failing to build family competence, those are just more of those 10,000 ways that don't work. Remember, when Edison built his team at Menlo Park, he didn't just give orders. He created an environment where everyone could contribute and innovate. Your family preparedness needs the same approach. It's not about one person knowing everything. It's about everyone knowing enough to work together effectively. Because in this world of increasing uncertainty, the difference between family resilience and family vulnerability often comes down to one simple truth. It's not how well you're prepared that matters. It's how well your whole family can function when you're not there. Start building your family's preparedness culture now, while you have the luxury of time to learn together. Because when crisis hits, the only plan that works is the one your whole family can execute. Stand back from your preparedness supplies for a moment. Really look at what you've built. Is it a cohesive system or just a collection of solutions? Because here's what analyzing thousands of survival situations has taught me. Most people don't have a preparedness strategy. They have preparedness stuff. And in 2025, with threats becoming increasingly complex and interconnected, that's a critical distinction that can mean the difference between resilience and failure. I learned this lesson through a series of cascading disasters in 2019. Each layer of my preparedness seemed solid in isolation. But when multiple crises hit simultaneously, I discovered what Edison learned during his years of innovation. Individual components can work perfectly while the system as a whole fails completely. Here's what failure taught me about strategic layering. Most people approach preparedness like building a wall, one brick at a time, hoping it's tall enough when needed. But like Edison's work on the electrical system, real resilience requires something more sophisticated. Multiple layers working together, each supporting and enhancing the others. Think about your current preparation system. How do your different components interact? How do they support each other? In today's world of compound crises, isolated solutions aren't just inefficient, they're dangerous. Because when one system fails, it often cascades into others, creating a domino effect of collapse. Let me share the 3 most dangerous strategy mistakes I see. First, the stack and hope fallacy, accumulating resources without integration. Second, the single solution trap, relying on one robust system instead of multiple complementary ones. Third, the perfect plan myth, building strategies that only work under ideal conditions. Here's what real strategic layering looks like. It's built on what I call the 5 levels of resilience: immediate response, 0-72 hours, short-term adaptation, 3-30 days, medium-term sustainability, 1 to 6 months. Long-term resilience, 6+ months. Recovery and rebuilding, return to normal. Most people focus heavily on 1 or 2 levels, but like Edison's electrical grid, each level must support the others. Immediate response without sustainability fails. Sustainability without recovery fails. Recovery without adaptation fails. The system must work as a unified whole. Let me show you what working looks like. Start with strategic mapping, resource interconnections, system dependencies, failure points, and backups, cross-layer support, adaptive capabilities. But here's what most people miss. Strategic layering isn't just about having multiple systems. It's about how those systems enhance and support each other. Like Edison's integration of generation, transmission, and distribution, each component should make the others stronger. Start rebuilding your strategy today. Use what I call the 3C method. Connect, link your systems together, complement. Make each layer support the others, cascade. Plan for graceful degradation, your immediate action plan. Map your current systems, identify connection points, build cross-system support, create transition protocols. Test system interactions, but there's another layer most people miss, the dynamic nature of layered strategy. It's not enough for systems to work together, they must adapt together. Like Edison's constant refinement of his inventions, your strategy needs to evolve based on real-world feedback. Consider what I call the flow test. Can you move smoothly between layers? Do resources support multiple systems? Can failures in one area be compensated by others? Does each layer strengthen adjacent ones? Can the system adapt to changing conditions? Your separate systems aren't your enemy. Individual solutions aren't your enemy. But treating them as isolated components, failing to build strategic connections, ignoring system interactions, those are just more of those 10,000 ways that don't work. Remember, when Edison created the electrical grid, he wasn't just inventing individual components. He was building an integrated system where each part enhanced the whole. Your preparedness needs the same approach. It's not about having multiple layers. It's about having layers that work together seamlessly, because in this world of increasing complexity and interconnected threats, the difference between survival and failure often comes down to one simple truth. It's not how many systems you have that matters, it's how well they work together when everything starts falling apart. Start building your integrated strategy now while you have the luxury of testing and refinement. Because when crisis hits, the only strategy that works is the one that's already proven its integration. Open your food storage right now. Look at every container, every package, every bucket. Now ask yourself this crucial question. How much of this would your family actually eat day after day without complaint? Because here's what studying long-term crisis situations has taught me. The most nutritious storage food in the world is worthless if your family won't eat it. And in 2025, with food costs soaring and supply chains fracturing, this isn't just about comfort, it's about survival. I learned this lesson during a 3-month grid-down situation in 2020. We had plenty of stored food, nutritionally complete, properly packaged. But by week 6, we faced an unexpected crisis. Food fatigue. My family was literally refusing to eat certain items. Like Edison discovering that technical perfection means nothing without practical usability, I realized that the best food storage isn't the most sophisticated. It's the one that actually gets eaten. Here's what failure taught me about food storage. Most people approach it backwards. They store what they think they should eat instead of what they actually will eat. They focus on maximum shelf life instead of maximum usability. But like Edison's approach to invention, real food preparedness requires balancing theoretical perfection with practical application. Think about your current food storage. How much of it is part of your regular diet? How many items have you actually tested in real meals? In today's world of increasing food uncertainty, The gap between what we store and what we'll eat has become a critical vulnerability. Let me share the 3 most dangerous food storage mistakes I see. First, the nutrition only fallacy, storing foods that are healthy but unpalatable. Second, the someday trap, buying foods you plan to learn to cook eventually. Third, the emergency-only mindset, keeping storage separate from regular meals. Here's what working food storage looks like. It's built on what I call the 5 principles of edible storage: family acceptance, everyone will eat it; regular rotation, part of normal meals; practical preparation, can actually cook it; taste sustainability, won't cause flavor fatigue; nutritional balance, meets dietary needs. Most people focus on just 1 or 2 principles, but like Edison's electrical system, each component must work together. Nutrition without acceptance fails. Acceptance without sustainability fails. Sustainability without practicality fails. The system only works when all principles align. Let me show you what working looks like. Start with a food reality check. Family food preferences, cooking capabilities, available preparation methods, storage conditions, rotation feasibility. But here's what most people miss. Food storage isn't just about calories and nutrition. It's about maintaining normalcy during crisis. Like Edison ensuring his electrical system could seamlessly integrate into daily life, your food storage should enhance, not disrupt, your family's eating patterns. Start rebuilding your food storage today. Use what I call the 3T method. Taste what your family enjoys. Test what you can actually prepare. Transform what adapts to multiple meals. Your immediate action plan: conduct a family food survey. Test, prepare all stored items. Create a rotation schedule. Develop multiple recipes per item. Build meal combination plans. But there's another layer most people miss: the psychology of crisis eating. When stress is high and options are limited, familiar foods become crucial for mental health. Like Edison testing his inventions in real-world conditions, you need to test your food storage under stress conditions. Try this experiment. Live for 1 week eating only from your storage food. Don't cheat, don't supplement, just eat what you've stored. Most people discover within days that their perfect storage plan has serious flaws. Your storage foods aren't your enemy. Long shelf life isn't your enemy. But storing foods, nobody likes. Ignoring family preferences, failing to test your supplies in real meals, those are just more of those 10,000 ways that don't work. Remember, when Edison developed the light bulb, he wasn't just focused on making it work, he was focused on making it practical for everyday use. Your food storage needs the same approach. It's not just about having enough calories, it's about having foods your family will actually eat meal after meal, week after week. Because in this world of increasing food uncertainty, the difference between thriving and merely surviving often comes down to one simple truth. It's not what you can store that matters, it's what you can actually eat and enjoy when regular food isn't available. Start rebuilding your food storage now while you have the luxury of choice. Because when crisis hits, the only food that matters is the food your family will actually eat. Look at your everyday carry right now, your car kit, your desk drawer at work. What do you see? Because here's what analyzing thousands of real-world emergencies has taught me. The most critical survival gear isn't in your basement bunker. It's in the small strategic caches you can actually access when crisis hits. And in 2025, with emergencies becoming more frequent and less predictable, this reality has never been more important. I learned this lesson during an urban emergency. In 2018, my main preparedness supplies were comprehensive and completely inaccessible. Trapped at work during a citywide shutdown, I discovered what Edison learned about practical innovation. The most sophisticated solution means nothing if you can't access it when needed. The small kit in my desk drawer proved more valuable than all my home supplies combined. Here's what failure taught me about micro-prepping. Most people approach preparedness backward. They focus on building one massive system instead of multiple small, accessible ones. But like Edison's approach to electrical distribution, real resilience comes from having critical resources strategically positioned where you actually need them. Think about your daily routine. How many hours do you spend away from your main preparedness supplies? In today's world of unpredictable threats, the gap between where your resources are and where you need them has become a critical vulnerability. Let me share the 3 most dangerous micro-prepping mistakes I see. First, the all-in-one place fallacy, keeping all your resources in a single location. Second, the too much trap, making kits too bulky to carry consistently. Third, the someday syndrome, planning to grab supplies from home when needed. Here's what effective micro-prepping looks like. It's built on what I call the 5 principles of strategic distribution. Daily carry, always on your person. Vehicle readiness, mobile resources. Workplace preparation, secondary base. Transit support, movement between locations, cache. Networks. Strategic backup points. Most people focus on just 1 or 2 principles. But like Edison's electrical grid, each point needs backup and support. Daily carry without vehicle backup fails. Vehicle kits without workplace supplies fail. The system only works when all points are covered. Let me show you what working looks like. Start with location mapping, daily movement patterns, common stopping, points, potential trouble areas, resource access points, alternative routes. But here's what most people miss. Micro-prepping isn't just about having small kits. It's about having the right resources in the right places. Like Edison ensuring reliable power distribution, you need to position supplies where they'll actually be useful. Start rebuilding your preparation strategy today. Use what I call the 3D method. Distribute, position resources strategically. Duplicate, create redundant capabilities. Disguise, keep resources discrete but accessible. Your immediate action plan. Map your daily movements, identify critical points, create appropriate kit sizes, establish cache locations, build rotation schedules. But there's another layer most people miss, the psychology of everyday carry. The best micro-prep kit is the one you actually have with you. Like Edison focusing on practical usability, your systems need to work within your daily reality. Test every kit with these questions. Can you carry it comfortably all day? Does it work with your normal routine? Can you access it quickly when needed? Does it cover your most likely scenarios? Can you maintain it consistently? Your main supplies aren't your enemy. Large-scale preparation isn't your enemy, but keeping everything in one place, failing to distribute resources, assuming you'll always be able to get home first, those are just more of those 10,000 ways that don't work. Remember, when Edison designed his electrical distribution system, he didn't build one massive power plant. He created a network of smaller, interconnected stations. Your preparedness needs the same approach. It's not about having one perfect cache, it's about having multiple accessible resources positioned where you actually need them. Because in this world of increasing uncertainty, the difference between survival and vulnerability often comes down to one simple truth. It's not how much you have that matters. It's what you can actually access when crisis hits. Start building your micro-prepping network now, while you have the freedom to position resources strategically. Because when emergency strikes, the only supplies that matter are the ones you can reach. Look at your preparedness budget for a moment. Every backup system, every redundant tool, every duplicate supply. Now ask yourself, how much of that redundancy is actually strategic and how much is just expensive insurance you'll never use? Because here's what analyzing thousands of survival situations has taught me. True redundancy isn't about having 2 of everything. It's about having multiple ways to meet critical needs. And in 2025, with inflation eating away at budgets, this distinction has never been more important. I learned this lesson the expensive way in 2016. I had duplicates of everything, identical backup systems, copies of the same tools, multiples of the same supplies. Then multiple systems failed simultaneously, and I discovered what Edison learned through his experiments. Having two of the same vulnerability doesn't create security. It just doubles your weak points. Here's what failure taught me about strategic redundancy. Most people approach it backwards. They duplicate items instead of capabilities. They create parallel vulnerabilities instead of diverse solutions. But like Edison's approach to innovation, real resilience comes from having multiple different ways to solve the same problem. Think about your current backup systems. How many are just copies of the same solution? In today's world of complex threats and economic pressure, the gap between effective redundancy and expensive stockpiling has become a critical consideration. Let me share the three most dangerous redundancy mistakes I see. First, the double everything fallacy, buying two of items that could both fail the same way. Second, the latest model trap, upgrading backups when old ones work fine. Third, the perfect match syndrome, insisting backup systems be identical to primaries. Here's what strategic redundancy looks like. It's built on what I call the 5 principles of effective backup. Capability focus, what need does it meet? Diversity of method, different ways to achieve it. Resource efficiency, maximum impact per dollar. Maintenance reality, can you sustain it? Cross-utilization, serves multiple purposes. Most people focus on just the first principle. But, like Edison's systematic approach to problem solving, each principle builds on the others. Capability without diversity fails. Diversity without efficiency fails. The system only works when all principles align. Let me show you what working looks like. Start with capability mapping, critical function identification, current solution analysis, potential failure modes, alternative methods available, resource, requirements. But here's what most people miss. Strategic redundancy isn't just about having backups. It's about having different types of backups. Like Edison testing thousands of materials for his light bulb, you need multiple approaches to each critical need. Start rebuilding your redundancy strategy today. Use what I call the 3P method. Purpose, what need are you meeting? Paths, different ways to meet it. Practicality, can you maintain it? Your immediate action plan. List your critical capabilities. Identify current solutions. Analyze failure modes. Research alternative methods. Build diversity into backups. But there's another layer most people miss. The economics of redundancy. Every backup system costs money not just to buy, but to maintain, test, and eventually replace. Like Edison balancing innovation with practicality, you need redundancy that's both effective and sustainable. Test each backup with these questions. Does it solve the problem differently than your primary? Can you maintain it within your budget? Does it serve multiple purposes? Can you test it regularly? Will it work when everything else fails? Your primary systems aren't your enemy. Backup solutions aren't your enemy, but blindly duplicating equipment, ignoring maintenance costs, creating parallel vulnerabilities, those are just more of those 10,000 ways that don't work. Remember, when Edison was developing his electrical system, he didn't just create backup generators, he developed multiple ways to generate, store, and distribute power. Your preparedness needs the same approach. It's not about having two of everything. It's about having multiple different ways to meet each critical need, because in this world of increasing economic pressure and complex threats, the difference between security and waste often comes down to one simple truth. It's not how many backups you have that matters, it's how many different ways you can solve each critical problem. Start rebuilding your redundancy strategy now while you have the resources to experiment. Because when crisis hits, the only backup that matters is the one that works differently than what just failed. Stop reading for a moment. Walk through your house. Look at every system, every supply, every plan you've made. Now ask yourself, have you actually tested any of this under real conditions? Because here's what decades of emergency response has taught me the most sophisticated preparedness system in the world is worthless if you've never practiced using it. And in 2025, with threats becoming more complex and response times slower, untested plans have become a luxury we can't afford. Learned this lesson during my first no-help weekend in 2015. I thought I was prepared. Had all the right gear, all the right supplies, all the right plans. Then I tried living on my systems for just 48 hours, and I discovered what Edison learned through thousands of experiments. Theory and reality are often painfully different things. Here's what failure taught me about preparedness testing. Most people approach it backwards. They assume their plans will work instead of proving they work. They practice components instead of systems. But like Edison's methodical approach to innovation, real preparedness requires rigorous real-world testing under actual conditions. Think about your current preparation level. How much have you actually tested in real-world conditions? In today's world of increasing uncertainty, the gap between theoretical and practical preparedness has become a critical vulnerability. Let me share the 3 most dangerous testing mistakes I see. First, the mental rehearsal fallacy. Thinking through scenarios isn't the same as living them. Second, the partial test trap. Testing components, but never the whole system. Third, the perfect conditions syndrome. Practicing only when it's convenient. Here's what real preparedness testing looks like. It's built on what I call the 5 principles of no-help weekends. Total isolation, no outside resources, system integration, all components working together. Family participation, everyone involved. Reality simulation, actual conditions, feedback, implementation, learning from failures. Most people never attempt even the first principle, but like Edison's systematic testing, each principle builds on the others. Isolation without integration fails. Integration without participation fails. The system only works when all principles are tested together. Let me show you what working looks like. Start with progressive testing. 6-hour trials, 12-hour challenges, 24-hour tests, 48-hour proofs, full weekend validations. But here's what most people miss. No-help weekends aren't just about testing supplies. They're about testing your entire preparedness system under stress. Like Edison testing his inventions in real-world conditions, you need to validate every aspect of your plans. Start your testing program today. Use what I call the 3S method. Start small, build up gradually, stress test, create realistic. Challenges, system check, test everything together. Your immediate action plan, schedule monthly. No help periods, create realistic scenarios, involve the whole family. Document all failures. Implement improvements immediately. But there's another layer most people miss, the psychological impact of isolation. When you're truly on your own, even simple problems become complex challenges. Like Edison learning from each failure, you need to understand not just what failed, but why it failed. Test your systems with these scenarios. Power grid down, no running. Wound, water. No outside communication, medical emergency security challenge. Your plans aren't your enemy. Your supplies aren't your enemy. But assuming they'll work without testing, practicing only in ideal conditions, avoiding real-world validation, those are just more of those 10,000 ways that don't work. Remember, when Edison was developing the light bulb, he didn't just test individual components, he tested complete systems under real-world conditions. Your preparedness needs the same approach. It's not about having plans, it's about proving those plans work when everything else fails. Here's your first challenge. This weekend, try living for just 24 hours without municipal power running water, outside food, internet, phone. Service? Most people can't make it past breakfast. But those who do discover something invaluable, they find all the ways their plans don't work while there's still time to fix them. Because in this world of increasing uncertainty, the difference between survival and failure often comes down to one simple truth. It's not what you think will work that matters, it's what you've proven works through actual testing. Start your no-help weekend program now, while failure is still an option. Because when real crisis hits, the only plans that matter are the ones you've already validated under stress. Take a hard look at your preparedness goals right now, your ideal scenarios, your perfect plans. Now ask yourself, how many of those goals are actually preventing you from taking action? Because here's what decades of studying survival situations has taught me. The pursuit of perfect preparedness is often the biggest obstacle to actual preparedness. And in 2025, with threats multiplying faster than anyone can prepare for them all, this paralysis of perfection has become deadlier than ever. I learned this lesson through years of expensive mistakes, always waiting for the perfect setup, the perfect equipment, the perfect timing. Then a series of cascading crises in 2018 taught me what Edison discovered through his thousands of experiments. Perfect isn't just the enemy of good, it's the enemy of survival. Here's what failure taught me about perfectionism in preparedness. Most people approach it backwards. They wait to start until they can do everything perfectly. They hold off on implementing until they have the complete solution. But like Edison's methodical approach to innovation, real progress comes through continuous improvement, not perpetual planning. Think about your current preparation status. How many actions have you delayed because conditions weren't perfect? In today's world of accelerating threats, the gap between perfect planning and practical action has become a critical vulnerability. Let me share the 3 most dangerous perfection traps I see. First, the complete system fallacy, waiting until you can implement everything at once. Second, the perfect gear trap, delaying action until you can afford the best equipment. Third, the ideal conditions syndrome, postponing preparation until circumstances improve. Here's what real progress looks like. It's built on what I call the 5 principles of practical progress. Start now with whatever you have. Build gradually, consistent small steps. Learn actively, through doing, not just planning. Adapt continuously as conditions change. Improve iteratively, based on experience. Most people get stuck before the first principle. But like Edison's approach to invention, each principle builds on the others. Planning without action fails. Action without learning fails. Learning without adaptation fails. The system only works when you keep moving forward. Let me show you what working looks like. Start with immediate action. Use what you have. Begin where you are. Take small steps daily. Learn from each attempt. Build momentum through action. But here's what most people miss. Preparedness isn't a destination. It's a journey of continuous improvement. Like Edison's relentless refinement of his inventions, your systems should always be evolving, always getting better, but never waiting for perfection. Start your progress today. Use what I call the 3M method. Minimize, reduce barriers. To action? Move, take immediate steps. Modify, improve based on results. Your immediate action plan. List your delayed projects. Identify perfectionist blocks. Create minimum viable versions. Implement basic solutions now. Build improvement cycles, but there's another layer most people miss. The psychology of perfectionism in crisis preparation. Perfect plans often become psychological barriers to actual preparation. Like Edison embracing each failure as a step forward, you need to see imperfect action as progress, not compromise. Test your approach with these questions. What can you start today with what you have? Which imperfect solutions are better than no solution? How can you improve through doing rather than planning? What small steps would make a difference now? Where is perfect becoming the enemy of prepared? Your standards aren't your enemy. Quality isn't your enemy. But waiting for perfect conditions? Delaying until everything is ideal? Letting the pursuit of perfection prevent progress? Those are just more of those 10,000 ways that don't work. Remember, when Edison was developing the light bulb, he didn't wait until he had the perfect filament design. He started testing with what he had, learning and improving through each attempt. Your preparedness needs the same approach. It's not about achieving perfection, it's about making continuous progress through actual experience. Because in this world of increasing uncertainty, the difference between survival and vulnerability often comes down to one simple truth. It's not about being perfectly prepared, it's about being better prepared than you were yesterday. Start your imperfect journey now, while you have the luxury of gradual improvement. Because when crisis hits, the only preparation that matters is what you've actually implemented, not what you plan to do perfectly someday. Look at your preparedness network right now, your community connections, your mutual aid relationships. Now ask yourself, have you found the right balance between isolation and exposure? Because here's what analyzing thousands of crisis situations has taught me. The lone wolf rarely survives, but the loudmouth doesn't fare much better. And in 2025, with social media making privacy nearly impossible, finding this balance has become more critical than ever. I learned this lesson through a series of painful mistakes in 2017, first isolating completely, then oversharing dangerously. Finally, a local crisis taught me what Edison discovered through his work at Menlo Park. Innovation requires collaboration, but success demands discretion. The key isn't avoiding community, it's building it strategically. Here's what failure taught me about preparedness networking. Most people swing between extremes. They either share nothing with anyone or everything with everyone. But like Edison's approach to industrial secrets, real success comes from careful collaboration with proven partners. Think about your current community situation. How many people know about your preparations? How many could you actually count on in crisis? In today's world of instant information sharing, the gap between necessary connections and dangerous exposure has become a critical vulnerability. Let me share the 3 most dangerous community mistakes I see. First, the total isolation fallacy, thinking you can survive alone. Second, the open book trap, sharing too much with too many. Third, the trust everyone syndrome, failing to verify before confiding. Here's what effective community building looks like. It's built on what I call the 5 principles of secure networking: selective disclosure, need-to-know basis; progressive trust, built over time; mutual benefit, two-way value; skill, complementarity, different capabilities; operational security, protected information. Most people ignore most of these principles. But like Edison's team at Menlo Park, each principle strengthens the others. Disclosure without trust fails. Trust without benefit fails. The system only works when all principles align. Let me show you what working looks like. Start with community mapping, essential skills inventory, local resource assessment, potential partner identification, trust-building opportunities, security. Boundaries. But here's what most people miss. Community building isn't just about finding people. It's about finding the right people in the right ways. Like Edison carefully selecting his team of innovators, you need to build connections that enhance security rather than compromise it. Start your community building today. Use what I call the 3V method. Verify. Check backgrounds carefully. Value, ensure mutual benefit. Validate, test relationships gradually. Your immediate action plan. Assess your current network. Identify critical skill gaps. Map potential connections. Create security protocols. Build progressive trust tests. But there's another layer most people miss. The psychology of community security. Trust isn't binary. It exists on a spectrum. Like Edison compartmentalizing his research, you need different levels of trust for different levels of information. Test each relationship with these questions. What do they really need to know? How have they proven trustworthy? What mutual benefits exist? How would they handle sensitive information? What's their operational security like? Your need for community isn't your enemy. Collaboration isn't your enemy. But blind trust? Unnecessary. Disclosure? Unverified relationships? Those are just more of those 10,000 ways that don't work. Remember, when Edison built his innovation team, he didn't advertise his secrets. He carefully selected partners who brought value while maintaining security. Your preparedness community needs the same approach. It's not about finding as many people as possible. It's about finding the right people and protecting what matters. Here's a practical starting point. Join local community groups. Observe before engaging, share general skills. First, build trust. Through action, protect sensitive details, always, because in this world of decreasing privacy and increasing threats, the difference between security and vulnerability often comes down to one simple truth. It's not how many people you know that matters, it's how well you know the right people. Start building your secure community now, while you have time to verify and test relationships. Because when crisis hits, the only connections that matter are the ones you've carefully cultivated and thoroughly vetted. Look at the world around you right now, the accelerating pace of change, the emerging threats, the evolving challenges. Now ask yourself, are you preparing for tomorrow's crises or yesterday's? Because here's what analyzing current global trends has taught me. The threats we'll face tomorrow are fundamentally different from those we prepared for yesterday. And in 2025, with technological disruption accelerating beyond anyone's predictions, this gap between future threats and past preparations has become our greatest vulnerability. I learned this lesson through a series of technological blindsides. In 2023, my preparations were solid for traditional threats. But when AI-driven market manipulation crashed local food distribution and quantum computing made standard encryption obsolete, I discovered what Edison learned about innovation. Yesterday's solutions rarely solve tomorrow's problems. Here's what failure taught me about future preparedness. Most people prepare for the past. They build systems based on historical threats instead of emerging ones. But like Edison's forward-thinking approach to innovation, real resilience requires anticipating and adapting to future challenges before they become crises. Think about your current preparation strategy. How much of it assumes tomorrow's threats will look like yesterday's? In today's world of exponential change, the gap between traditional preparedness and future threats has become a critical vulnerability. Let me share the 3 most dangerous future planning mistakes I see. First, the historical bias fallacy, assuming future threats will mirror past ones. Second, the technology blind spot trap, ignoring emerging technological threats. Third, the static solution syndrome, building fixed systems for evolving problems. Here's what future-focused preparedness looks like. It's built on what I call the 5 principles of adaptive readiness. Threat evolution, tracking emerging risks. Technological awareness, understanding new vulnerabilities. Flexible response, adaptable systems. Continuous learning, staying current. Forward planning, anticipating changes. Most people focus on traditional threats only. But like Edison's vision of the future power grid, each principle must evolve with changing realities. Historical preparation without future awareness fails. Awareness without adaptation fails. The system only works when it grows with emerging threats. Let me show you what working looks like. Start with trend analysis. Technological disruptions, social system changes, economic shifts, environmental challenges, emerging threats. But here's what most people miss. Future preparedness isn't just about new threats. It's about new ways that old systems can fail. Like Edison understanding how new technology would change society, you need to see how emerging changes will affect existing. Vulnerabilities. Start your future-proofing today. Use what I call the 3F method. Forecast, identify emerging threats. Flex, build adaptable systems. Future-proof, create evolving solutions. Your immediate action plan, audit your assumptions, identify technological vulnerabilities, map emerging threats, build adaptive responses, create learning systems. But there's another layer most people miss: the acceleration of change itself. The pace of disruption is increasing exponentially. Like Edison's continuous innovation, your preparedness systems need to evolve faster than the threats they're designed to handle. Test your readiness with these questions. How will AI affect your current systems? What happens when quantum computing breaks encryption? How will climate volatility impact your plans? What new technologies could disrupt your preparations? How will social systems change under pressure? Your experience isn't your enemy. Traditional preparation isn't your enemy. But assuming the future will mirror the past, ignoring technological disruption, failing to adapt to emerging threats, those are just more of those 10,000 ways that don't work. Remember, when Edison looked to the future, he didn't just improve candles, he imagined entirely new ways of lighting the world. Your preparedness needs the same vision. It's not about perfecting old solutions. It's about creating new ones that address tomorrow's challenges. Because in this world of accelerating change and emerging threats, the difference between resilience and obsolescence often comes down to one simple truth. It's not how well you're prepared for yesterday's problems that matters. It's how well you can adapt to tomorrow's. Start evolving your systems now, while you have time to experiment and adjust. Because when future crises hit, the only preparations that matter are the ones that anticipated the change. Your future survival depends not just on what you know now, but on your ability to learn, adapt, and evolve faster than the threats around. You, like Edison's relentless innovation, make continuous improvement your only constant, because in 2025 and beyond, the only certainty is change itself.